Color is one of the most important parts of graphic design, so essentially what I'm saying is you cannot afford to mess it up. And that's what this full guide color video is all about. And hey, let's kick things off with an insightful visual experiment. So according to standard color theory, red means danger or passion, right? Yet this luxury watch advertisement uses red, this Formula 1 poster uses red, and Netflix uses red as well. It's the same color essentially, but a completely different feeling or meaning across the board. Nobody looks at a premium watch advert and thinks, this feels dangerous. Nobody opens up Netflix and thinks, how romantic. I guess Netflix and chill is kinda close. But anyway, this is because one of the biggest myths in graphic design is that colors have fixed meanings. They don't. At least, not in the way many people have actually been taught. And I'm here to properly teach you color theory in the first part of this video. Because the truth is that color psychology isn't completely wrong as such, it's just sort of incomplete in some people's minds. The thing they are normally missing is that context is super important when considering the meaning of color. For example, the typography changes the meaning, the imagery changes the meaning, the industry changes the meaning, and of course the audience changes the meaning too. In fact, I could take the exact same shade of red and make it feel premium, make it feel loud, or make it feel playful, and that's without ever changing the color itself. But yes, color psychology is real of course, but it's more nuanced than a lot of designers realize. You do need to consider everything from imagery, typeface psychology, layout, and the whole 9 yards. And throughout this guide, you'll see that color is often doing far less work than people think. A lot of what we give color credit for is actually being ushered along by hierarchy, by contrast, placement, context, strategy, and everything else, those design principles. And once you understand those things, color almost, if by magic, becomes much more easier to work with. So, to take things a bit further, I like to personally think about color as operating across 5 different layers. And we are going to go through those layers right now. And after that, we're going to build a system around them. Yes, you're going to get all sorts of value from this color guide video today. So the first layer of color is what you might think of as the functional colors on your designs. Functional colors exist to help people understand information essentially. So think about buttons, navigation systems, warnings, status indicators, dashboards, all that good stuff. And so before we start worrying about motion, branding, or visual styles, we should ask a very simple question. Can people understand what they are looking at? If the answer is no, then it doesn't really matter how good the palette is. The color has failed its primary job. The second layer is emotional color, which is the layer that most designers are already familiar with. Certain colors absolutely influence how people feel. Warm colors can feel energetic, cooler colors can feel calmer. Certain palettes can feel playful while others feel serious. And of course you have things like desaturation, tints, vibrance, and so on. But the problem is that people often take these ideas too far, too literally. Blue can communicate trust, for sure, but it can also feel cold, it can feel corporate, clinical, modern, premium, or even boring depending on how it's used. Emotional color is useful, but it should be treated as a guide and not a rulebook. And the third layer is cultural color, and really I think this is one of the most overlooked areas of design. Color meanings change dramatically depending on where your audience comes from. For example, white is often associated with weddings, purity, and celebrations throughout much of the Western world. Yet, in parts of Asia, white has historically been associated with mourning and funerals. Green might communicate sustainability to one audience, finance to another audience, and religion to another. And as designers increasingly work for global audiences, understanding cultural context becomes incredibly important. The fourth layer is competitive color, which is one of my favorite ways to think about color strategy. Most industries gradually develop color monopolies. Banks love blue, luxury brands love black and gold, eco brands love green, technology companies often, lean heavily towards blue and purple. These color associations become reinforced over time because they actually work. But here's where a mature designer can step in. This knowledge creates an interesting strategic decision. Do you fit into this or do you want to stand out? Sometimes using the established industry color instantly builds trust because audiences already associate with that sector. But sometimes it can actually make you disappear into a sea of identical competition, aka bad juju. With knowledge comes power, and with this power, you decide for the best. And that brings us to the fifth and highest layer, the strategic color. Instead of asking what color looks good, professional designers ask what this color is trying to achieve. Is it trying to attract attention, build trust, differentiate from competitors, as we've discussed earlier? And once you actually start asking yourself this as a designer, color decisions become far easier because you're no longer just decorating a design as such. I realized more recently that being a designer at times is mostly just finding things, replying to things, and remembering where somebody sent something, which of course can be somewhat life force draining. But something that aims to totally change that and flip it on its head is Superhuman Mail. And what I actually like about it is that it doesn't feel like one of those tools trying to completely reinvent mail. It mostly just removes a lot of the headaches around the whole email thing as a designer. For example, this Ask AI feature is genuinely useful. I can just ask something like, where did the client mention the final dimensions? And it pulls it up instantly instead of me spending 15 minutes digging through old threads like I'm searching for ancient scriptures or something. And I'll be honest, I thought the write with voice thing was going to be terrible, broken, just not usable. Because normally AI written emails sound incredibly obvious, right? Like somebody trying far too hard to sound professional. But this actually keeps the way you naturally speak surprisingly well, which means replies still sound like you instead of sounding weirdly robotic or overly formal. And then there's auto drafts, which is probably the feature I ended up appreciating the most over time, mainly because follow-ups are one of those things, those tiny things that slowly drain your energy throughout the day. Having those replies drafted and ready to go genuinely makes the whole communication side of work feel so much lighter. Basically, it's just less mental clutter, which is probably one of the biggest compliments I can give a tool like this. And so if you do want to try Superhuman Mail yourself, you can get 1 month free with my link down below. And thanks to them for sponsoring this part of today's video. Now let's take all of these ideas and turn them into a practical system that you can actually use right now. That would be pretty nice, right? For this system to work, it helps to think of your colors as having different jobs. So first, you have your primary color. This is the hero color, if you will. It's the color most strongly associated with that brand, maybe the product or the concept. And this is often where your emotional, your cultural, your competitive, and your strategic decisions we spoke about earlier begin to show themselves. It's essentially the color carrying the identity of the project. Then you have your secondary color. This color exists to support the primary color. It can add flexibility, it can add depth, and it can add variation without trying to steal the spotlight. In many cases, this is where you can reinforce the emotional direction of a brand or introduce additional visual characters without disrupting the overall message. And after that comes your accent color. This is where attention lives. So things like the call to action, important information, focal points, areas you actively want people to notice. And this is often where functional color becomes incredibly important because these colors aren't just there to look nice. They're there to guide behavior and to create hierarchy. And finally, you have your neutral colors. And if you ask me, these are probably the most underrated colors in the entire palette. Neutrals create structure. They actively create breathing room on your designs and they support readability. They allow your primary and accent colors to actually do their jobs. And that's why they're so underrated. Without them, every color ends up fighting for attention and eventually none of them would win. And this is one of the reasons why professional palettes often feel so much cleaner than amateur ones. And that real fundamental reason is that every color has a clearly defined job. And that, more than anything else, is the real secret behind color in modern design. The truly competent designers out there today are building systems with color in this way. And once you start approaching it this way yourself, you'll find that your work suddenly just feels a bit more intentional, far more professional than before, and ultimately more effective in the end game. But if you would like to brush up on your skills and learn some new skills, just click a video on screen because YouTube thinks you will find this one useful. But until next time, design your future today. Peace.